Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at the great human bottleneck. It's a mind-bending moment in our deep prehistoric past when humanity literally almost didn't make it. Okay, let's jump right in.
8 billion. Right now, there's over 8 billion people on this planet. You share a phone network with strangers on 6 continents who you'll probably never meet. But here's the really strange part. Every single one of those 8 billion people is actually your cousin. And I don't mean distantly or just symbolically. I mean genetically. To understand why, we've got to look backward. Somewhere around 70,000 years ago, our entire species didn't look like this massive interconnected globe at all. Instead, the global human population dropped to a number smaller than a modern high school. Just let that sit for a second. We're not talking about a single village or tribe. We're talking about the whole planet. Some scientists put the number as low as a few thousand breeding individuals, just scattered and struggling on a world that seemed to be actively trying to erase them.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is that you are not descended from a thriving dominant species. We're the genetic legacy of scattered, struggling survivors of a literal near miss. And the story of how they made it through says more about why you exist today than almost anything else in human history.
To really grasp what they were up against, we need to look at 74,000 years ago, when the Toba volcano erupted in Sumatra. This was one of the largest volcanic events of the last 2 million years, and it triggered a catastrophic domino effect. Within weeks, ash buried South Asian landscapes. Within months, sulfur choked the upper atmosphere, and sunlight just dimmed. This triggered a severe volcanic winter. We're talking decades of brutal scarcity stacked on top of an already unforgiving ice age. Plants failed, animals starved or migrated, and early humans were caught right in the middle of it all.
Now, this specific idea actually has a formal name in the academic world. It's called the Toba catastrophe theory. It was popularized by geneticist and anthropologist Stanley Ambrose back in the late 90s, proposing that this massive climate disaster pushed humanity right to the edge, leaving only a small, resilient handful of people to pass their genes forward. And it wasn't necessarily because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had some combination of luck and adaptability that meant they were the ones who didn't die. Now, what's really interesting here is the evidence Ambrose used to build his theory. When you compare human genetic diversity to other great apes, humans are strangely, almost suspiciously uniform. To put that into perspective, chimpanzees living in a single forest can show way more genetic variation than humans do across the entire globe. Kind of wild, right? Well, that incredibly narrow diversity is the classic signature of a population bottleneck. It's exactly what happens when a species is squeezed down to a super small number of individuals, and everyone alive today descends from that one surviving handful.
But is this theory absolute? Well, not quite. To really get the full picture, we have to look at how divided the scientific community actually is on this. While Ambrose points to the Toba eruption as the primary cause of a severe bottleneck, researchers like archaeologist Chris Clarkson push back. Clarkson's counter-evidence, like stone tools found in India, suggests human populations actually kept functioning right through the ashfall. On top of that, genetic studies are totally split. Some estimates agree the population landed in the low thousands, but others suggest the bottleneck might have happened for different reasons entirely. Or maybe it stretched out over a much longer period of time rather than stemming from one single eruption.
But here's what almost everyone in the scientific community agrees on. Whatever the specific cause was, at some point in the deep past, the human family tree narrowed to a trunk so incredibly thin that a slightly worse decade could have ended the whole shebang. Which brings us to the ultimate mystery. How does a species actually survive something like that? If our numbers dwindled so low, what got our ancestors through, generation after generation, until eventually someone was writing scripts and building the modern world?
Well, the answer isn't individual toughness. It isn't raw physical strength. It was cooperation. That was our ultimate survival technology. To understand just how powerful this was, we can look at anthropologist Sarah Hardy's concept of cooperative breeding. Unlike most primates, early human mothers didn't raise their children alone. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and even totally unrelated group members all pitched in. If a mother lost a partner, fell sick, or simply needed rest, she had backup. Her child didn't automatically die. In a world vastly thinned out by disaster, a species that shares the burden of raising the next generation has a massive advantage. You don't need every single individual to be strong. You just need the group to be able to absorb loss without losing the next generation entirely.
There's another vital piece to this survival puzzle, and that's food sharing. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Hadza in Tanzania, have observed something that looks almost exactly like an insurance system.
A successful hunter doesn't just eat their catch alone. They share it, often according to strict social expectations across the group. Why give away food you worked so hard for? Well, because tomorrow you might be the one who comes back empty-handed. In good times, that looks like generosity. But in a crisis, like a volcanic winter, a tribe practicing this kind of food sharing can weather a bad week, a bad month, or even a bad year. The group absorbs the shock.
And it wasn't just food and childcare either. It was shared survival infrastructure, fire, shelter, clothing made from processed hides. These were small technological steps that, when stacked together, meant the difference between freezing to death in a suddenly colder world and making it through the night. None of these innovations belonged to one lone genius. They were the accumulated, shared knowledge of small groups who talked to each other, taught their children, and passed down exactly what worked.
Now here's the part that should really land for you. None of this was a long-term calculated plan. Nobody sat around a fire 70,000 years ago drawing up cooperative social structures to survive a global extinction event. They were literally just thinking about tonight and whether there'd be enough food tomorrow. But the stark reality is that immediate choice to operate as a cooperative group rather than relying on highly vulnerable individual strength fundamentally shaped our human wiring forever.
Which brings us right back to you, watching this explainer today. Think about it. Why do you feel the pull to help a struggling stranger? When you watch the news or see slow-motion catastrophes unfolding around the world, why is the instinct of so many people to reach out, to check on others, and to share what they have, even when it costs them something?
It's because we're wired to lean on each other. That urge to help is quite literally your oldest evolutionary trait. It makes zero strict evolutionary sense if survival was only about individual strength. But the stark truth is, the humans who didn't feel that pull, who didn't share, who didn't stick together when things got terribly hard, well, they simply aren't your ancestors. Their lines ended. The ones who made it through passed that cooperative wiring forward generation after generation until it became something you don't even think about. It just feels like being human.
So, the next time the world feels unstable or overwhelming, I want you to remember this final thought. We're over 8 billion strong today solely because a small, cold, hungry group of humans in deep prehistory chose the collective over the individual. You aren't just here by accident. You're descended from cooperators. You're here because once being human meant refusing to let each other go. So the real question is, as we face the global crises of our own modern age, will we remember the single trait that saved us the first time? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.